Good morning. Just a little bit more than 250 years ago, Paul Revere rode through the streets of the villages of New England, shouting, "The British are coming, the British are coming." Well, today, September 22nd, 2025, I have to tell you, the British are coming, the British are here, they may be in the White House. If we have learned anything from what we saw that happened in London this last week. So I'm Harley Schlanger with your daily update for the LaRouche organization, and let's start with that. The disgusting display of the Anglo-American special relationship in London when President Trump was greeted by King Charles and the leaders of the British defense sector and tech sector, and the Silicon Valley tech sector came with Trump. What we saw was the war party with the City of London, in the City of London. The British are on an offensive to recapture the US presidency. Just as the City of London announced that intention during Trump's first term. You may have remembered a special report released by the House of Lords in November 2018, in which they warned that the re-election of Trump would mean probably the end of the special relationship. And they said that this is something which must be stopped. The report was called UK Foreign Policy in a Shifting World Order. And the shifting world order was a reference to the Great Reset that was underway at the time, which was designed to ensure that no sovereign nation state got in the way of the continuation of the Anglo-American Empire. Now, this special relationship is what was on display at the banquet hall in the Windsor Castle, and in the toast that was given to King Charles from Donald Trump. Now, the British are intent on pulling Trump away from any relationship with Vladimir Putin or President Xi of China, for example, and the fact that Trump and Xi had a cordial discussion last Friday obviously had the Anglo-American establishment quite upset. Now, it's NATO, the European Union, the World Economic Forum, the representatives of the global corporate cartels. They were hysterical when Trump was elected in 2016, even more so when he was re-elected in 2024. What's the problem for them? The American Revolution. Their fear that the ideas of the American Revolution of freedom, based on the commitment of the state to act for the general welfare, not for the private interests of the City of London and Wall Street, that's their fear. And when they see the emergence of a potential anti-imperial world order centered around nations of the global South, but largely now able to do something because of the power of Russia and China and India. And so the strategy from London is permanent warfare. It's to disrupt this. And that was on display with the events that took place in London. Now, I will say very simply, whoever wrote Donald Trump's toasts that were delivered in London should be fired. Here we are on the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. Who did we fight the American Revolution against? Oh yeah, it was the British Empire. Who did we fight again in 1812? Who was trying to break the United States apart by supporting the Confederacy in the Civil War in 1861? The British Empire. And it was after World War II that the British Empire asserted an iron grip on U.S. policy, operating through the City of London networks on Wall Street and in Washington, and now with Silicon Valley in a relationship with the military tech sector of Britain. We're seeing this again. Now, I just want to go back to what his toast was to King Charles, because there are a couple of points here which show an absolute disregard for the American Revolution and a defense of the British Empire. And it's hard to imagine that Donald Trump, who has spoken of his love of the American system, didn't understand the words that he was reading, but it was clear he was stumbling a little bit in reading them. What he said is he praised the British for the Magna Carta, the modern Parliament, and Francis Bacon's scientific method. Then he talked about the works of Locke and Hobbes. Locke was a defender of the slave system. Hobbes was an anti-human who described the world as a battle of each against all, a world of a jungle, and the strongest would survive. That's the American system. And then he praised Smith and Burke and Isaac Newton. And he went on to say, the legal, intellectual, cultural, and political traditions of this kingdom have been among the highest achievements of mankind. Really? You ought to rethink this, Mr. President. Then he went on to say, there has never really been anything like it. That's true. A global empire that lasted for the last 250 years. He said, the British Empire laid the foundations of law, liberty, free speech, and individual rights virtually everywhere the Union Jack has ever flown, including a place called America. Well, we took down the Union Jack, and the idea that it was somehow a symbol of liberty and freedom, it's an abomination to say that. And then he talked about the bond which inspired the term, Winston Churchill, to coin the phrase special relationship. So openly praising the special relationship. And he said the term special does not begin to do it justice. We're joined by history and fate, by love and language, and by transcendent ties of culture, tradition, ancestry, and destiny. No, 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 no. This retreat from the American Revolution is unacceptable, especially now that much of the world is recognizing the superiority of the ideas of the American Republic, the idea of sovereignty, of nations that act in the interests of their population in cooperation with other nations for mutual benefit. That's the future. And what Mr. Trump, the speech that he read, was from the past. It was a hand coming out of the grave to drag the United States back into a deadly embrace with the British Empire, which was responsible historically for many, many more deaths than the Nazis or the communists. Now, given that, the question then is, what does this mean for today? Because we're seeing something which is interesting at the United Nations. You have the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia announce they're going to recognize the Palestinian state, along with France and Portugal. But what will that mean? Will it mean an end to the genocide in Gaza? Will it mean an opportunity for the Palestinian people to come out from under a murderous assault? Well, not if the President of the United States continues to support Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, there's a significant development that took place last week, which most of you probably don't know about. An agreement between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan to extend the Pakistani nuclear umbrella over the nations of the Middle East. In a sense, giving the Arab countries a nuclear bomb. Now, this is occurring at a point in which the Israeli government is moving to destroy completely Gaza and drive the Palestinians out, as Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are saying. And at the same time, there's extensive discussion about the next stage of the attacks on Iran. Well, the Arab world is not sitting there passively and quietly. And the idea of a Pakistan-Saudi agreement based on extending the Pakistani nuclear umbrella to Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries means that the United States must rethink its commitment to supporting the genocidal regime in Israel. Now, Netanyahu, meanwhile, is continuing to threaten everyone. So what we're seeing is the special relationship. Now, one other point on the special relationship, and I mentioned the House of Lords document, and I'm going to be appending that so you can read it if you wish. It'll be in the description section, a link to it. What's the idea of the special relationship? Well, Russiagate was a defense of the special relationship. The British stepped in and gave a completely fabricated story to the Democrats in particular, but also a lot of the neocons who Trump destroyed during the 2016 presidential campaign, made up a story of being corrupted by Putin and elected by Putin to try to stop the normalization of relations between the U.S. and Russia, which President Trump still says he intends to do. If he's going to do that, he may end up in big trouble, as they say, with the British aristocrats he was schmoozing with in London last week, because they do not want a peace based on a U.S.-Russian rapprochement. So take a look at this special report and think through with us, what can we do to break this special relationship? And we'll have some marching orders in the next couple of days. And in the meantime, we have to make sure that the United Nations goes ahead and acts on its principles by moving to stop the Netanyahu Zionist regime from carrying out the extermination of the Palestinians.